Introduction of bills. And again, introduction of bills. Minister's statements. The Minister of Consumer Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the Ontario Legislature for Black History Month. I join Canadians from coast to coast to celebrate the history, achievement, and contributions of Black Canadians. The story of Black people in Canada is a narrative that began before the founding of the nation and is one that continues to be written with every passing day. The pulse of that story beats with rhythm and energy and is a part of the lifeblood of our country. That is why it is so fitting to set aside a period of time each year to revisit old chapters and to look towards new ones. It was one Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, who saw the importance of setting aside time to recognize the achievements of a people who were being written out of history, whose stories were hidden from the textbooks and the library books, from the newspapers and media reports, and whose accomplishments and successes did not emerge to the forefront. It was that legacy that brought about Dr. Woodson's vision of Blacks as keepers of their own history, so it would not be lost and it would not be forgotten. Today, Mr. Speaker, as Ontarians, we are all entrusted with being the custodians, protectors, and promoters of each other's most important truths and identities. The history of Black people in this land is a vital and exciting part of that collective trust. We recognize the Ontario Black History Society, the archives of some of our history, and its president, Mrs. Rosemary Sadler. However, we all have a shared responsibility in ensuring that the history of Black Canadians is archived in every institution of learning, through libraries, newspapers, books, and other mediums of record in the province of Ontario and in Canada. Our history exists in the corridors of the Parliament of Canada, where Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine was the first Black woman elected. In 1995, Dr. Augustine moved a motion supported by the Ontario Black History Society declaring February as Black History Month in Canada. Others, such as Senator Don Meredith and those from across Canada, the Right Honourable Michael John, former Governor General of Canada, Senators Donald Oliver and Ann Cools, and Honourable Marlene Jennings, have authored important chapters through the noble path of public service. In the corridors of the Ontario Legislature, Honourable Lincoln Alexander, the first Black Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, Mr. Leonard Braithwaite, the first Black member elected, Mrs. Zanana Akande, the first Black woman elected, and Dr. Alvin Curling and Mrs. Marianne Chambers were Black members elected. You're here. Dr. Curling was the first Black Canadian to hold a cabinet position in Ontario and the first Black Speaker of the Ontario Legislature. At Toronto City Hall, where William Peyton Hubbard was the first Black Canadian to hold public office in a Canadian city, elected to City Council in 1894. In our educational institutions, where Dr. Avis Glaze blazed the trail along with other Black educators. In our hospitals, Dr. John Douglas Salmon was the first Black chief of surgery in a Canadian hospital. In our courthouses, the appointment of Honourable Justin Aston Joseph Hall to the provincial court bench this year is notable. He sits as a role model for Black youth throughout the province. Ontario is home to individuals like Josiah Henson, who was the first Black person featured on a Canadian stamp. He helped to establish the Dawn settlement in Dresden, Ontario, as a refuge for former slaves after escaping through the Underground Railroad to Canada. the Dudley Laws of this world who fought for equality and justice with sheer determination and much personal sacrifice. I certainly feel humbled to benefit from the sacrifices, vision, and leadership of those individuals and other trailblazers, as I too participate in the history of Blacks in Ontario and in Canada. Last year, I became the first Black woman re-elected as MPP in this legislature.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
Also, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, today I sit with my colleague, MPP Michael Coteau. He and I have also crossed another threshold together. This is the first time two Black elected members are seated on the government side of this Ontario legislature. As we celebrate Black History Month, these words of Dr. Martin Luther King, whose memorial now stands tall in Washington, D.C., are thought-provoking, and I quote, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice," unquote. We all have a part to play in ensuring that not just Black people, but all people have the security of a just society. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I think it is apropos to read the closing lines from Maya Angelou's poem, "Still I Rise," which words are metaphoric to the resiliency of Black people and our history. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a Black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream, I am the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I would, thank you. And I would ask all of you to join us today for a reception with the Premier to honor Black history and my co-host, Mr. Michael Coteau, MPP, at 6 p.m. right here in the Ontario Legislature in the Government Caucus Room. Thank you.
Thank you.